Tell me about San. Was it the first investor on board? Has anyone told you you're too young to do this? Do you think that you were privileged or lucky to get to a stage where you are?
Self-belief is the only trait that young founders should have in abundance because it will be shattered every 6 months.
Perks of podcasting for me is to talk to people like you. Aryan Sharma, welcome to JarXchange.
Thank you.
You're the youngest person that we've ever interviewed. I'd like to start by, can you give us a quick demo of what you're building?
Okay. I'll walk you through a few things.
Yeah.
It has a lot. So I'll just go through this. So the main idea behind how it started was there's a lot of work that's happening in AI, and the most obvious interface for that has been chat so far, where you ask questions, you get answers. That is one way of productively deploying these models to do stuff. But when these models became capable, like chat and anything else that gets built with them is basically how close are you getting to replacing humans is the Terminator situation. But close, like smaller version of that is how much human work can you augment with these models, and that is what we started with. That beyond standard chat, beyond standard question answering, how can you use the power of these models to do more productive tasks in the workspace in any setting. So this is what the form factor has come to now after multiple iterations. But the industry or sector that we build in is broadly called as AI agents, which is just how do you train models to do more complex tasks. Instead of just giving you an answer, it is, if you like design a landing page for me, if it's able to look at some designs, produce some code output, produce a page, then keep iterating on it again and again and deliver a final product to you. So it's not selling a piece of a puzzle, it's selling the entire work output. So the way our take on agents is we are trying to create an alternative computer which can self-operate and do things for you.
Okay.
So the way it works is, this is what you on the screen is, this is just a browser within a browser. So it's, I've opened up this interface as a URL bar. There's a stream that you can see that's induced written there. If I just I'll just go to a URL. This is the training mode. So before the agent is able to do work for you, you're basically guiding it by showing काम कैसे होता है. But so basically I would just say the first step that I've done is I've just gone to a URL. I've gone to finance.google.com, and it it's basically, it's like showing an employee or a team member how you would want to do work. So we'll take an example task. I've come to this page. After I'm on this page, I want to, let's say I'm here, I want to click on this button here. So I clicked on the search bar. That step is also recorded. So click on search is recorded. Now let's say we want to search for, or we're seeing Bitcoin here, or like S&P 500. I just click on S&P 500. So this step is also recorded. So step by step, everything that we're doing, any workflow that someone has to do in the workspace, you can essentially record it. It could be on Google Finance, could be in HubSpot, could be in any tool that you're regularly using. And while you're doing it, the system is capturing steps and just understanding that behind this goal, these are the steps that are involved. I'm just recording standard interactions right now. So I've gone to Google Finance, done some clicks. You can also teach the system how to do more complex reasoning based tasks. So an example of that would be, let's say within a flow, you want to capture some data and that's being used later. So this is what used to happen in the RPA industry, but let's say I'm just saying, in my flow, I have to first come to a stock page, and after that I have to capture the name of the stock, and I'm going to use it later on in the flow. So just go to the capture section, you can put in what you want to capture. It'll take some time, it will capture it, and you can see the section that is highlighted. It captures the name. You can keep reprompting it to capture more things. And then once I click accept, that is also added as a step. So we've done 3 standard steps. We've done a data capture step. You can also do a more complex reasoning step where if you're like, let's do something random, right? Let's, for example, what do you think of the graph that is seen on this page? And then just send that. Done some steps. You can also capture screenshots and teach specific things. So I've captured a full page screenshot. I can also capture specific parts of the page. So if I'm just capturing the graph and then I select that, now it's learned how to capture a focused part of this page, all of that. So I'm basically creating different kinds of flows. You just spawn up this session, go to your tools, do whatever steps you want to do, record them, and then once you save them, it's just index that X person when they're using Google Finance, this is how they use it. Or you can even go deeper into stock analysis is done this way, XYZ is done this way, etc. It's basically a full-blown browser. You have a scroll feature here, so you can scroll down to different pages, you can come up, you can, any interaction that you can possibly do, it'll be done. And everything that this is what we call a runtime. So all of your steps are recorded, all of the things that you've captured, you can see them as variables added within the runtime. So the stock name that we are on, the screenshot that we captured, the focus screenshot that we captured, it's all put into this runtime, it's all saved and collected.
Am I doing it to train the agent, or am I just doing my work?
So ideally, you're just doing your work, and you want to just have the agents watch over your back to see what is happening, so it slowly learns out. Right now, it just feels like it's very hard for people to switch browsers. So because this is a new browser, you'll have to log in, you'll have to get all your accounts in. So what we like to do is just, you are still doing your work, but you're doing it only once. So you want to train the agent. That is the intent behind it. But eventually, if it becomes good enough, or if it's just a Chrome extension, then you can be using a regular browser and it will still capture everything and store information back. So this is how the base system gets trained. Now, once you have the base that is created, what you do is, let me open another thing. So this is what the record section was for. You have a separate run section. So here you can see all of the tools that I have trained it on. I've trained it on Amazon, LinkedIn, and then if I click on Google, for example, there are, you can see all of the skills that I have trained. So analyze and index on Google Finance, test, saying this is a testing thing, compare two stocks, analyze, whatever. All my skills are recorded and stored, then it has context of how I'm using Google Finance. This is what the main product is, where once you've trained it to do different things, you can just, let's say I give a goal, analyze the S&P 500 using my skill. And then this is just, it's standard chat. So I'm putting this information in. It'll take whatever past context it has about how I had originally trained it.
And after you train, so it's constantly observing.
It's constantly observing as long as you're on the train mode on. So and you are free to select what you want to train it on, what you don't want to train on. So analyze the S&P 500 using my skill. It's produced a bunch of steps which are sourced from the data that it's run. So it's going to Google Finance, click on market indexes, click on this, do this, do this. And then if I'm just run this for me, please. And then just do it. So this is, for me, it's just a new tab that's open. I have an assistant that I'm instructing. I've said, give this go, just produce some steps, and then I'm saying run. So now the run part is interesting to see. And you can keep reprompting. So until you say run, it'll just stay like that. You can be 3 steps are fine, 5 are not fine, do this, do that. So it's just said the steps to analyze S&P 500 are ready to run, initiating the action plan now. And I'll do a call. It spins up a browser on the left. You can see there's a slight yellow dot that is there on the screen there. That's the bot cursor. So it's automatically gone to market index. Now it has to click on S&P 500. So it'll pick, it's all happening real time. So it's looking at the page. It's looking at the step that you want to run.
Tell me a practical application that I can use it for now.
So
or say some months down the line.
Our original thesis was that in any knowledge work setting, and originally it was let's look at top line affecting functions, or sales, marketing, any of those kinds of functions. There is core work and there's a lot of admin work. So for any person, for a sales rep, talking to the customer, understanding their needs, and then fitting the product and making it most usable for them is the core work. There's a bunch of supporting work. Add a ticket to HubSpot. The need is not super warm. We send them a follow-up email. This is not done. This is that. Interacting with tools, internal, etc. So the idea behind this was, for all of those repetitive tasks, this is a different kind of copilot, which is not just answering questions or giving you text outputs, but once it looks at how you work, once it understands workspace context, the knowledge worker or the person who's using it is just focusing on core tasks. And this is just open as a tab. It's like a different computer, but all of the admin tasks, you're just typing it out that I just had a conversation with XYZ person from this company. Go and add them to HubSpot and do my standard post-sales process. And it goes to HubSpot, enters 3 leads, confirms it, done. Goes to another platform, does it. Then the chat is open. So you have one chat thread that is open. You're just prompting it. It has learned how you do different tasks. And then ek karke you're just saying, do this, do that, and it's like just doing work for you.
And
While
while
you
the
focus on
agent is doing something, I can focus
I
on
can do some. So this is just a different tab. I can open a different tab, continue doing my work. I can take another call. So for an average salesperson who was taking 6 calls a day and then spending 5 hours doing admin, they can take 10 calls a day. And all of their admin, it will happen slower, obviously, because all of these steps are slower. The bot is doing it. But the time is saved and can be productively utilized to do what was core. So that's one like broad analogy of how I would use. But in terms of capabilities, all level 0 knowledge work, filling forms, adding standard like inputs into systems, project management tools, doing stock, like capturing images, doing some analysis basis that, all like sorts of all standard web interactions, all of that is doable with these agents and bots. They basically look at what you've done and then they try to mimic it. So we don't have a capability limitation. It's just slowly you go up the knowledge work spectrum, where right now it can just do clicks, fills, some basic analysis, produce some questions, do some things. Eventually, if I see this graph, and because you're a finance audience, I'm like, run a regression on this, or run a prediction for where this will look like end of this week based on the first 3 days data. All of that should also be like, will eventually be possible. Right now, just look at this image. What do you think? It's green, blue, like standard stuff. But as models become more capable, the scope of tasks it can do will increase. But the broad idea is, think of it as a self-driving browser. You've taught the browser how to do your work, and then you just trigger the browser. It's going to go do your work and come back, and you have a chat interface saying, I've completed your work. What else can I do for you?
So is it very personalized? So whatever you train this for, can I also use it, or I have to train my own agent?
We have a standard set of templates on popular tools. LinkedIn has like search for a profile, send a message, change your profile picture. All standard things are converted into templates. Other things you are allowed to, free to train different things on. The interesting part is, you're not training because it is an agent and not a static RPA system or a static bot. You're not training it to explicitly do what you like what's in your example. So I might train it to do stock analysis on Tesla, but I can replace that to be like, I don't want to analyze Tesla, analyze the Dow Jones for me, or analyze like Nifty for me, and it'll automatically realign the steps to accomplish. So you have to broadly train it on doing a workflow. The specific nuances of that, it can keep modifying and changing on it. So that broad template that we have is the base for people to get started with. You can personalize it and train it where, like, in the runtime, you're like, when I'm sending a message, I don't want to start the message with this, or I don't want to send the message from the message tab. I want to first look at their profile, create a summary, and then use that summary to send a message.
So there is some standardization for the tools that you build, and then it can be personalized to you and me. But my agent is not talking to your agent.
My agents are all separate. Data are stored separately. Everything is stored separately. You are allowed to share it with your team. The other application that we go after is large admin or back office teams, where there's a back off or a BPO, which they're doing a repeatable like back office form filling task. 5,000 people are doing the same thing. So for them, they have to train it once, and all 5,000 can access the same template and keep using it.
And that was my next question. Is it an individual use case, or it is an enterprise solution also?
We have so far been focused on the enterprise, just because extractable value of the product is most visibly seen in the enterprise. But slowly what we are figuring out is that as the tech, like all of this is experimental tech. This is like the reason it takes so long to develop is we are running our own browser on the back. This is a custom Chrome-like browser that we have built that is designed for bots, and maintaining that whole infra, building it out independently, getting the model to control the browser. It takes, when you're experimenting with tech, it is best to like to validate. You want to go to the user group that feels the pain the most, which is why the enterprise focus was there. But we realize as the tech gets better, it is maybe not as bad of an interface for even a regular user to use. Where like it will always be power users and people who care about productivity, who are like the value of an hour is important. Only those people can look at the people who are personal assistants or people who want to have structured processes. That sort of prosumer or power user is what we might eventually go after. But right now it's very, and like we've designed it from an enterprise perspective, which is how auth and everything is also handled. All of these bots can also do authentication. So they can go to LinkedIn, they can type email passwords, and if you have a 2-factor code sent, they can read your email to put the code. They have an authenticator app. Every bot has their own email, they have their own phone number. It's like a mini employee that's just sitting on the cloud, and they cannot do everything, but they can do things that you've trained them to do very well. The analogy that I like to give is most productivity tools are focused on making the user 5x more productive. Where if Aryan is using it, a XYZ tool will make a 10x Aryan because I have shortcuts, I have different things. There's Aryan, 1x Aryan. I'm creating 0.5x versions of him, but 50 of those. So all of the small grunt work that needs to be done, that can be taken care of by the bots. So you have an army of bots at your disposal that can do stuff that you want them to do. So that's broadly the idea. It is still very challenging tech because we are, instead of focusing on just models giving, or chat models giving outputs, we're focusing on delivering entire work processes and basically mimicking what a human does in a workspace. So it's an upwards climb from there. But
And how far are you in the journey? Where are you? If this has to go to an enterprise, the first client or the first use case, how far are you in the journey?
so we are already live with a few enterprises. We did a launch in October because the first version was just about ready. Then we have several thousand on our sign up list. We are live with lesser than 100 right now, but we're still live with a few in different capacities. Some of them are using it from an API, some of them are using it on pre-built workflows that are just running. But the idea behind the first 25, 30 integrations that we did was we want to test where the system breaks, because it's going to break. It's very new. The tech is not, it's not being built before. So that's been the process where we've, over the past few weeks, we've had a big jump in reliability, runtime success. It is slower, but it gets the job done. And then the next, you want to first make it work, then you want to make it work fast. Because most of this work is anyways happening in the background. So speed is not as big of a concern as reliability is, especially in the enterprise.
What is it doing exactly, if you can talk about it, in the enterprise, without naming the enterprise, but what exactly the work that is?
Well, the stuff that we do is mostly look at a profile, using the agent system, analyze, create a summary, then look at what I'm selling, create a custom message that summarizes, uses the profile summary with my product context to come up with a message that person will respond to, and then finally send that message. So sending messages, analyzing profiles. We have some LinkedIn resume and hiring inbound management system that just look at profiles, look at how many referrals they have, look at what college they're from, create a bulleted list, and then add it to a Google Doc. So it just processifies, does stuff like that. So LinkedIn, from a sales and just people management perspective, is one big use case. The other big use case we've seen is a lot of form filling that happens in old industries like healthcare, insurance. For example, in the US, a lot of insurance claims they have to do a pre-authorization form before your insurance is given. So it's what is your name, standard details, what provider are you claiming your insurance form, and etc. It's a big form, 25, 30 steps. That usually is filed either by the provider or the patient and is very time consuming. It's completely useless as an activity for the person who's doing it. So for a few companies, even in insurance, right, when you're filing a claim, there's a big form that has to be filled. So we automate a lot of that, where they just get the claim details, they get the patient details. We just take those details and we go and fill a 25, 30 step form by smartly identifying this information has to go in here, this has to go in here. So people who used to just sit and fill forms can now do more stuff outside of form filling. So healthcare, insurance, old industry, form filling is kind of the other big use case that we have. And then in general, this is there's a big industry around just data capture and data scraping, etc. It's sort of in the gray area for a lot, because a lot of tools don't allow data scraping, and but the tools that do allow, this is a very beautiful system to do data capture of all kinds, because I don't even need to, I showed you the capture highlighting thing where it can pick specific information, pick paragraphs, etc. But you can also just pick images directly and extract information from it. So your data scraping process doesn't need to deal with a web page. It's just going to a page, taking a screenshot of the page, extracting information, and then giving it out. And because we are using multimodal models, you can also understand images. So it's not like I'm going to Amazon, I can not just capture the title and everything, I can understand what color the shoe is, how big the shoe is, all image modalities are consumed. So those are three big sort of use cases where sales, marketing, LinkedIn related tasks, form filling in healthcare, insurance, and then a bunch of data operations, data capture. Is that primarily, that's 90% of what we do right now.
Are a lot of people building something like this?
The agent space has So there are different kinds of agents you can create. What we are creating is an exclusively web-based browser controlling agent. There's a bunch of companies that are working on the same problem, but you can have different architectural takes on this, where there's a fundamental, it's a very hard problem. It's a very, very hard engineering problem, because how the web works is what you're seeing is some code that is rendered to show you a graph or show you a button. Every web page has a different sequence or different style of writing that code. So you cannot assume that a button on one page will be like a button on another page. So getting these systems to understand what a web page looks like and then interact with it is a very hard problem. So there have been different takes on it. There's a model take on it where can you create a new GPT-like model that is exclusively focused on clicking and filling. So it's just focused on computer interactions. There's different approaches where let's not use the web at all. Let's just use code. Where we'll produce code, we'll do work in code, we'll give output in code. Like there's a sweet spot between building too much tech and not building enough tech at all, because you want to make a big capability jump. We are a very engineering focused team. That is also our background. So we cannot build a distribution led business that's directly sells. So we have to really win on product, but it cannot go too far. So there's a sweet spot between what sort of capabilities exist and how much engineering you can do on top of it to make things sort of functional, and then you keep building on top of it. One interesting insight about this space in general is that we are in a very accelerating environment. So stuff that I thought was not possible 6 months ago is like normal right now. So we are well positioned in that sense, where like this tech still is sort of there. Like for most people, they will not have the fastest, most delightful experience with it now because it's clunky and it's like you're making things work. But in a year, that will not be the case. So that's usually kind of the best place to be in as a startup or someone who's building technology, where the tailwinds are in your support. So it's just how far can you go with the capabilities and how strongly you can hold your position so that when the capabilities happen, you're best positioned to capture the market value that comes out of it. It has been proven that all of the model companies, all of the large companies have realized that just productively deploying models in the workspace is where most economic value will be created in AI. There's a lot of value in consumer as well, but that's where a lot of just cash will be produced. Because
so do you run backwards? You take a problem of the enterprise and then start working on it, or you just...
We did a little bit of both. So we figured out that this, so the bots marketplace has been there for a long time. People have been creating internet bots as soon as the internet started, for data scraping, for all kinds of things. When these models came out, there was this like brief moment where it felt like the capabilities of these bots can be significantly improved, because the old way of creating bots was this thing that I did where I went to Google, I recorded my whole flow. It was all recorded in English, where go to Google, click on the search bar, type this. Earlier, it was recorded with like code snippets. So you're like every element on a page has a selector or a identifier to it. And it's this alphanumeric ID, XYZ3554. And you're capturing that ID and you're putting it. So go to this page with this ID, click on this button with this ID. And those IDs keep changing. So it was a very tedious manual process where a simple Google search is like 100 lines of code. And that entire thing has to be constantly maintained because the script can keep breaking. So that was historically how bots were created. They are very useful because almost every company has some sort of bot that's doing something on the web for them. But when these models came out, there was a realization that we can change how these bots have been created. We can simplify the interface of how they're created and maintained, and we can make it accessible to a lot more people. Where a non-technical user, someone in finance or someone in ops or in marketing, was not able to write a bot script to do something. But with an interface like this, where they just have to do something once and then the bot can do it for them, it's much more easier for them. It just increases. So that's why we also broaden the scope of the market, where an existing large market now has new UX that allows for more. And you're expanding the scope of the market because a lot of people who could not access it because of a technical barrier can now access it. So we sort of worked, we knew there was a big problem and this big category of in tech that exists, and with models being there, it just made sense that we can build a ground up new experience. That's also my other like kind of take on this, where I think most AI products, the only value for startups can be created in these autopilot, like ground up rebuilds of products, where if you're just building a copilot where I'm on a website, I'm on Airbnb and there's a chat thing there which helps me with travel booking and stuff. It's an incumbents game. Every company that has a web product will eventually build a version of their own copilot. It just seems inevitable.
It's happening, no?
It's already happening. Like most, like Booking.com has their own thing. Most products have some sort of chat interface built out right now. So building thin wrappers on top of existing services, it's easier to get started. It's easier to raise money. It's easier to start selling. But your lifespan is significantly shortened because if you want to sell it off in 12 months, that's great. Choice as a founder. But if you want to build something large, it's in picking a tough engineering or a tough technical problem. It's going to take several months to solve. But it's a fundamentally new take on the problem. What we are building is like a new browser that can do stuff for you, and that is hard. It's like questioning a lot of things, and it has high odds of failure. But that's the kind of problem that has a payoff vector that deserves like a team that is working hard on it and that's spending resources to figure something out.
How big is the team now?
We are 8 people, still very technical, but we have a mix of designers and ops people. We're a good size now. I think 8 is comfortable for us.
Okay. Before I go to the entire funding thing, what's the biggest challenge for you right now?
3 months ago, this would have been a different answer, but
and by the time that is released,
it might be a different answer. But it's also some good sign of speed is there. We're moving fast.
No, interesting that you said it will take time. It's a long game. It will take some months to build. I thought you'll say it will take some years to build, but
that's optimism, or because it might still take a while. But I think we are very clear on product and kind of scaling this and continuing to build on top of this. There has to be a sweet balance between how quickly you are able to get user feedback to like not spend time on the wrong things. And that's stuff that I am training myself on now, where like as the moment you start going and deploying with users, especially when it's a complex product, there's a question of taste, where if you build a very opinionated product experience, it's like everybody will have different things. Like, can you do this way? Can you do this way? Do we want this feature? Do we not want this feature? And I think that like we have just entered that phase where for a few months, for the first few months, we were exclusively in engineering mode, where like let's just get this thing working. Now we've moved into the phase of now it's in the hand of a few people. They are giving us different. Like we have this, if you see on the screen, we have this whole feedback system built in where like users can like directly like take a screenshot and give us feedback of how stuff is working for them or it's not working. So we get like several hundred of these every day where different screenshots, this is this way, this is this way. So we are setting up, like that's my brain share right now, where how do you set up a product process and work through it, where now it's in the hand of people, they're giving feedback. Something
the more focused on solving
a
specific problem rather than brilliant engineering, is it?
Correct. I think it's like 80% of hard engineering was built out, and now it's always, you always keep building new stuff. But beyond that first level of engineering, a lot of it is like UX. Like what this interface that you're seeing is a very evolved interface from the original thing. Like I still have the original version.
I think I met you 2 months back. It was different back then.
It was different. So we originally, our version used to work like this, where it was not, you were not teaching it stuff by actually doing it on the browser. You had this interface of, it's sort of like this notebook where I have steps on the left and I'm typing steps on the left. And then there's a browser stream on the right, and I'm just like, I type in a step, it does things. I type in a step, does things. From there, we went to the interface.
So it was dictation earlier, kind of.
It was dictation earlier,
now
step by step. Now it's observing on its own. So for you, you don't have to type anything. It's just, I'm doing work as usual. It's auto capturing stuff on the back. So like even this is a big technical leap because it's a different interface just from the front end, but on the back, there's a lot of stuff that changes. So there's been a lot of strong iteration that happened on the tech. Now it's a lot about how you keep refining on the experience to make it usable. How do you, like the simple chat thing is there, like how should the assistant respond to you? How should it, like, there are a lot of experience ideas around if you're doing the same thing every day at 10 a.m. Next time when you open the chat, just prompt the same thing, like you did this for the past 5 days. Do you want to continue the same flow rate? So it's the idea is just like, how do we build the best augmented this productivity tool that can help people accomplish more? And it's a lot of experience product questions right now. We started early last year, and then this thing we specifically started building around April. So it was, the first 6 months was just engineering, like I said. The next 4 months has been a little bit of like engineering combined with feedback. So base was ready, how do we build? And now it's mostly feedback and experience design.
You don't sound like a 19-year-old, and I'm sure you've heard that enough. How does that feel?
Like, I don't know what the ideal 19-year-old should be, or like most people, I think most people now don't. Everybody's sort of broken that, where it's mostly about how quickly can you start doing what you want to do. So it was like, I think also for our team, like our team is a very special mix. My co-founder is very similar. We have a bunch of people, we have 2 more who are also very young, have built companies before or have built their own projects before. So in the setting that I'm in, it's no longer like a special thing where you're like doing something at a young age. It's become like you almost have like a running clock where just like everybody else, you have to deliver like XYZ at XYZ time. You have like only limited amount of resources available, and you have to hit the next milestone in that time. So it's now it's become very.
So you're surrounded by that tribe.
I'm surrounded by that tribe, and I think in some sense it's been great working with the kind of people that we've worked with, because people have been very accepting and supportive of us when we started. Because when we started, we were like clueless kids who didn't know. Like now, I think I wouldn't bet on myself at that time. Like if I were like a logical investor, because no previous company building experience, just out of nowhere want to build something, never built a team before, never like knows like good engineering, but doesn't know how to scale that or how to like build a process around it. But at that time when we like people were very supportive, where we'll figure it out. The advantage of time is you can make some mistakes, and they allow you to make those mistakes. And I think that's broadly also how tech works, where it's one of the few industries where young people are appreciated and they can do stuff.
Are you worried that you lose focus on engineering and execution once you start managing a team and building processes and everything? Have you thought about it? Like,
a lot of it is people like talking about like managerial stuff and like team and business and stuff, because they scale up, and that's a new thing for a lot of technical founders who start doing it. But at the end of the day, what just matters is you building product and talking to customers and giving it to them. Everything else that's happening is just fabric to glue it together. So if you don't do it the traditional way of like scaling up a team or figuring out how stuff, like you have to learn from those things. You can't run a hacker house operation even when you're like in the hands of real customers. But I think there's a special breed of founders who continue to be very close to product and talking to customers even at like large scales. Companies like Replit, Playground, a lot of companies that are sort of like us, where you're building an infrastructure product, and there's like it's a very technical product, but you still want to talk to customers. I think founders can scale without like standard managerial chaos that happens in most large companies. You can still have like very, very small like IC circles. You can still have very, very small like just the reporting structures where you like 3 people, 5 people, and you know everybody. And just ultimately, I think we don't need a very, very large team to deliver a large like, product experience. Like 10 people is probably where the delta changes. Like the first 7, 8 people, you feel a magnitude difference every time you get one more person, because every person is doing so much. Beyond 10, it's like that if the tech can scale, especially in the kind of product that we are building, you don't need too many people. So I like my worldview is capped at how can I run a very, very large operation with just 20 people? Because that is like WhatsApp was very, very small in this world. A lot of companies have proven that. A lot of great AI companies, I think Perplexity is like 30 people now. Midjourney for the longest time was just 10, 15 people with like tens of millions of monthly active users. So I think it's possible. And that's the kind of company or structure that we will naturally want to go after. Where
this
continue.
What's the point of AI tech company with 700 people ops, right? ठीक है, तो अब पीछे चलते हैं. Tell me about you.
So I've grown up in Mumbai. I was here all throughout, which I think was also very important in just shaping up, because where you grow up can like just show you a lot of, like, can make you ambitious. If you, especially when like your family is also on an arc of growth. You see, you've grown up in a small house and then you get a bigger house, and then that's the whole process happens. So I've grown up here. I went to school here, and I think I've always been fascinated by tech. So I used to like write code, and it's a very like cliche story at this point where every young technical founder starts writing code when they're like 10, 11, 12, and they just like continue doing stuff. Very similar in that sense, where I started writing code early and I was just fascinated by doing things on a computer. And that's how like 7th, 8th grade is when I started like actually building complete like set of things on my own. The first thing that I did was, I think in 9th or 10th grade with like a few other friends in high school, we started a podcasting app. One of the ideas that we written on the app was something to do with like voice translation at that point, but it was not even a podcasting app. It was basically, we used to take podcasts and we used to like, we wanted to auto summarize them. So to consume a long podcast, it takes a while. It's like if I can consume a 60-minute podcast in 5 minutes with like a visual doc or with something. Now there's a bunch of apps for that. Like I think there's a bunch of apps that do that now, obviously because we have models and everything. But at that point, we used to manually do it. So we used to take podcasts, we used to manually summarize them, like make these docs and then upload them to an app. And that was kind of the original idea. So we raised a little bit of money for it.
In 10th standard?
Like 9th and 10th. It was not actually too much money. It was like just we spoke to 2-3 people. They're like, you want to build this app? Okay, just like take this much, go build it.
Like a college project?
Like a college project.
School project.
Basically. But that was the first time. Like for us, it was a big thing. So like we are building a company. Like take us seriously. We are like, we have this, that. And at that point, like even like 50,000 rupees is, it's you can do so much. I'll allocate 10,000 to marketing. I'll allocate 10,000 to servers. I'll like all of that. So that was my first like experience doing something real.
Okay.
It didn't pan out very well. So we ended up shutting it eventually, but it was a fun experiment to like do the whole thing from scratch. After that, so
Ayush was with you back then?
No, Ayush was not with me back then. So we met right after that in like 11th grade or so. But at that point, this was my school friends, a different circle. All of them are doing different things now. So nobody has stuck to like tech. After that, so I was right after I completed 10th, 11th grade. That was also the COVID time. So it's that we didn't. I had a lot of time on hand because everything was remote, and you didn't have to physically go to school and go to college and places. So right after that, so this was right before my 10th board exams or something. I because I was still writing stuff on Twitter and posting stuff publicly, I'd built this one project which was taking X-rays, taking CT scans of the lung and doing a COVID diagnosis with that. So do
you come from a doctor family?
I come from a doctor family. So my parents are both eye doctors. And that is where the thing originally started from, where they were talking a lot about how tests are not available. RT-PCR was in a shortage. And the only other way you can diagnose COVID at that point, at least, was instead of doing a chemical test, you take a DICOM 3D scan of the lung, and then you look for lesions and like spots that are found on top of that. So there was open data sets on Caltech and a bunch of places. We just gather the data, do simple transfer learning, make a model that can not super accurately, but it can do basic quantitative diagnosis that like it'll just bucket them. This is definitely not COVID positive. This might or might not be. So you'll have a lot of false positives, but it does quantitative diagnosis for a doctor. When tests are not available, you can do 50, 100, 200 scans and still like serve patients, and the doctor can reevaluate it, but basic stuff is done. So I'd made that model and I'd made that tool, and it was free. I just put it out publicly. And then a few doctors used it. I gave it to a few doctors that I knew. And through that project, I met someone, this investor on Twitter, who connected me to someone else who was this founder who was starting a new healthcare company, but he was previously the CTO of Ola. I was just introduced to him with context of maybe you should show him what you've built and see if there's anything, or you can work with him. And then I showed him the thing, and I was like, this is what I've done, and I would love to work with you in some capacity. And he was like, okay, let's like do something. And so this is, I was like, I'll start working tomorrow, or like, let's do it as soon as possible.
This is 2020.
This is 2020, I think. 2020 or 21, something around that time. I was supposed to study. I started working on the company.
Exams for 11th.
The 10th main like board exams. And
वो भी दिए?
हमारे वाले cancel हो गए थे. So we were the batch that did not give those exams. But at that point, I didn't know that. So I was still under the impression that 3 weeks later or a month later, I have those exams. But this is like just too much fun to not do. So I started working with him on that. The company that he started is now scaled up. So it's called Spry. We were building physiotherapy AI at that point, where the same thing where you like stand in front of a camera, instead of a physiotherapist coming and training you to do stuff, the camera is just instructing, raise your hand 90 degrees, put it up, and real time, your image is seen. There's a bunch of dots on your body, and you can see what angles you're on. It will give you a full musculoskeletal physiotherapy like report. That was, in hindsight, a very similar kind of problem to what we are building in terms of how hard it was. It took several months for the first version to come out. It had a lot of like different edge cases scenarios, but now it's
working.
It's great product used by a lot of people, and it's a big pull. Like it's one of the most special things that exist in the space.
So you're part of that project,
I joined as an intern to just do that project. And then I just kept working with them on that project, just building that. They were also building other products at that point, but I was just focused on that like simple project. But my relationship with Bridge, who was the founder of Spry, I was also learning a lot from him in that process, like subtly, where like he used to teach me a lot of just also like observing a company being built, where when I first met him, it was like 2-3 people, and then like he got in more people, raised money, scaled it up, and then that whole cycle of how the first set of sales started happening, how the first set of like users started coming in, how feedback happened, how we went from doing like async calls to like daily stand-ups. Just the whole process of how a company is built was very interesting to watch at that point, because
and that was all remote.
That was all remote. So there was like some in-person interaction that used to happen, but that was all largely remote. I also think like the thing that I was saying about people being very supportive, this is also another example of that, where a random kid who's like about to give his board exams or whatever is coming to you with something, and then you're willing to work or give that person a chance. That is how like tech is built. Like it's people offering help, and that's how relationships and companies are created. So that was the next thing that I did right after that. That was also the time where I was like figuring out what I want to do after like 11th, 12th sort of situation, where do I want to go to college? Do I not want to go to college? And I was, at one point I was like, I don't want to go to college in India. Maybe I should go outside, but then it's too expensive. So how do you go outside? And through that project that I built, I'd applied for a few scholarships, and I ended up getting one, which was, it's run by Eric Schmidt, who was Google's CEO, his foundation. They run this thing called Rise. They give you up to $500,000 worth of courses. If you go to college, they'll pay for the whole thing. They'll handle everything. So that happened right around that time. So I was like, now, like there's a backup situation that's built. It's sort of like the Thiel Fellowship, so they'll support you in other things also, but they take care of college. So then I was like, Upto, like there's no point I'm staying and studying for IIT exams in India. I will either not go to college or like maybe go to the US or do something like that. And then after that, like once I completed that project with them, the physiotherapy AI system, I just kept building more things. This was all while I was still like doing school parallelly on the side. And it ended up happening so that because I built, this was also a time where I met Ayush. So we met on Twitter, realized we stay in the same place. He's also from Chembur and now has like moved to Bangalore with us. But he was also in a similar situation where he had like done these exams and he was also frustrated with just like school and studying and very like.
But वो तो formality होता था ना COVID.
वो तो हाँ वो formality भी होता था. It was also like I think he's one of the most brilliant engineers I know. He's a great hacker. You give him a problem, he will come up with a solution, and he will do it in a way that most people will not be able to think. Like, he's just gifted. And when I met him, I was like also trying to do my own things, and we were both in a spot where it's like we clearly don't want to study. We want to build something, and let's just do it together then. Like, it doesn't make sense. The other thing is, I think most people who are in that young phase, it's very hard to find people who are committed, because you cannot do this with someone who is like, I've not spoken about this before, but I think when young people start companies together, it is very important to have ambition and commitment matches, where if you're like half paddling, where I'm like doing something but I'm also studying, or if I'm doing something and also working on something else, that doesn't work. You have to find people who match your energy and match your ambition to go all in on something at the same time. And that was very clear for us, where we'd worked on projects before. We were both in the same thing, and we could see that we can trust each other enough to like go all in on it together. And worst case, we'll figure it out. Like we can do something together enough that we have some assurance that we will not be on the streets. And that was the thing that we started with originally. We were not clear what we wanted to build. We tried a few different experiments, different ideas. We went to some hackathons together. But it just happened so that after that, we decided that there's no point of us continuing to study.
माँ बाप ने क्या बोला?
उस टाइम पे तो ऐसा था कि after I got the scholarship, they were a little free.
Plan B.
हाँ, मतलब they were like, if he has to go to college, he can go anywhere, because that also adds a little bit of credibility, and they'll pay for it, so we don't even have to pay for it. And they had seen the work that I was doing in the past, so they're like, kuch to karta hai. Like, he will figure it out on his own. But they were like, we'll keep a close watch. So agar kabhi problem aa gayi, तो we'll pull you back and like get you to do something else. But
And even with Ayush?
With Ayush, it was slightly more like strict and extreme. Like, they really wanted him to go to an IIT. And that was what his life was 9th grade onwards for the like first 3-4 years. And he has had all of these like stories of how he used to like stay up at night and code under his blanket, because they were not allowing him to code normally. But now they're all like, there's concern. So it's all coming from the right place. It just is like different ways of expressing it. So now they're all again very supportive. But that's how originally there was like a small period of time where they're like, are you sure of what you're doing? But it was a very smooth transition, where like as soon as we decided we started working on some stuff. And then we were like, this is like, we'll figure something out, we'll work. And we were making some money at that point. So because we were like, we could write code, we used to take up some freelance projects or do some stuff, and we were making money. So we were not even like asking them for money at that point. And that just organically morphed into us starting a company together. But the company came much after. So we started working together. We built some projects. So US to ऐसे गए थे कि while we were working on these projects, we got a grant for one of our projects. This thing that one of our investors, Human Capital, they used to run this thing called the Delta Fellowship, which was you build like whatever you want to build. It was mostly for college students. So we were, I think, the only or one of the few teams internationally that they've ever taken without anything. Like, it's usually like Princeton, Harvard, all of these people, like college founders who go and get some money. They give you $50,000 as a grant to build whatever you want to build. And that was the first set of money that we got access to. We're building this project and this is what we want to do. And they gave us that grant. And they were like, just use this to build whatever. And no strings attached. So you don't need to take more money from them. You don't need to, you can use the money for anything. So that first set of money is what we used to like go to the US for the first time, go to San Francisco, see like their office. They were hosting some events and founder dinners. see what like people are like.
So that got you into a network.
That got us into the first like network. I was parallelly also like I used to, because of Twitter and other things, I've always been very focused on outreach and just meeting new people. So I was in a lot of different communities while I was still here. So a lot of remote programs, a lot of remote founder fellowships. I was in all of those like small circles. It all combined together when I went there for the first time in person, because I had a reason to go there. And then I was able to meet all the people who had just seen on Twitter and had virtual conversations with. And that was the first time where we figured out that like there is a place in the world that is like so special, where companies get built in SF, the iconic Steve Jobs house, Stanford, all like the like as soon as you drive into the city from the airport, you see like billboards of tech companies. The only city in the world where you will see that. And global tech company, you'll see the Google offices, like in Menlo Park, Facebook offices. Also, that was very fascinating at that point, and it's also inspiring in some ways, where you walk into a city and you're seeing stuff that you always wanted to like see, or you like tracked so much. And I met a lot of people who I had like only seen on YouTube or in interviews, and even if not in person, like just through events and stuff, it's like this guy is 10 feet away from me and I've only seen this person on YouTube. So that was it was a good experience, where the grant thing that happened. And then right after that, we were like it doesn't make sense for us to do anything else. The world is changing too fast. Tech is getting built too fast. And the opportunity cost for us to not do something after receiving the grant and like after being in SF, that was like it's just too high. Like it doesn't make sense for us to do anything else. So that's how the company formally got like started. We incorporated after that and stuff. But at that time was like summer of 22 is like late August, September 22 is when we were like, it makes sense. Let's do something. And then let's figure out what we want to do after that.
Did you understand the whole thing about raising money, cap tables and all of these things?
I understood from a YC perspective, because that's the only founder material that I had consumed, where what is a safe? How
You were not a YC batch.
we were not in a YC batch, but we were planning to apply to YC if we were not able to raise money separately. We were able to, so then we didn't apply. So it was like by the time I was starting the company, I was sort of normalized with the fact that like it was not a big thing for me to think that raising money is going to be a big achievement or a step up. It was like this is a part of the process of doing things. I also think people, when they look from outside, don't understand that raising money for a lot of people who are building something that they are so passionate about and think has potential is not a very good thing. It's like when I'm raising money, I am giving a portion of the potential reward to someone else in exchange of money right now, which is several magnitudes lower than the reward that will get unlocked. Like if I'm building something that will be worth X or like arbitrarily 100 million in the future, and I'm raising money right now, I am taking money and I'm like a part of that reward is going to other people. Now that is not, it's not as simple as that.
Because I mean, depends on what you're building.
Correct. It also depends on your ability to get to that reward will also be influenced by who you bring on board and how they help you. But I think in a lot of ways, it's like raising money should not be celebrated as much, because it's like a founder's journey or it's a team's journey. There are people who are playing a supporting role in it. And it is very important, because a lot of time the supporting roles ensure that the team can get there. But like especially founders celebrating their own thing is very weird, because it's like it's like you should ideally be able to do something. Like if you're in a very resourceful environment, you're able to build something even before raising money, and then raising money is only an accelerating function. So I was like, I used to think very differently at that point, where it's like raising money is not the thing. It's like we have to get people who will help us do the things that we are not capable of doing. We can write code and build a product, but we need to get people who've seen life cycles of companies being built. So they can tell us when to hire, they can tell us when to like not do something, when to do something. They can tell us how just markets work, how people work, and how the industry works. And that's the kind of mix that we went after. That's the kind of investors we got, and that's the kind of people who are best suited for young founders, where You just don't want the money. You want people who can give you stuff and enable things for you beyond the money. So I had some ideas around how that process works. Rest of it was also a lot of figuring. We made a lot of mistakes in the process. We didn't know how to hold a call. I don't know. The first time I went, I didn't know how to hold an investor conversation where what am I supposed to do at the end? I explained the whole thing. Do we talk about something else? When someone asks you what is the round you're raising, what do you say? What is a round? Am I raising a round? A lot of times when you go into these conversations, you're not raising money, but then they assume you're raising money, and then there's whole, especially when you're doing it for the first time. So a lot of that was figure it out on the go sort of situation. But I think again, we were very lucky with the kind of people that we got.
Yeah, I was about to ask you, do you think that you were privileged or lucky to
I think
at least get to a stage where you are?
I think there is a base level of privilege in everything. That I don't understand privilege as a concept. It's very debatable, very hard thing to map. But I think the thing that helps is being exposed to ideas where if while growing up or at an early age, if you have exposure, a lot of it was just the internet. But if you have exposure to things, it solves for a lot of you're basically not.
And that's what I mean by being not privileged or lucky, being at the right place at the right time, because not everyone would have gotten that exposure probably. There's a part that you took it all in. You were also interested. You were doing things obviously, but then they're being at that place at the right time. Right?
I agree that a lot of it is right place, right time, which is very hard to engineer for.
Yeah.
And I think that just being able to getting exposure is not in your control for most people. If you have exposure and you decide to use it, it's great. But a lot of people can also do so much more if they were just given exposure at the right time. I think just access to internet has solved that for most people. But if you want exposure to new ideas, to people, to stories, you can get it without permission. You don't need to wait to go somewhere to get exposure. But makes sense to you and you just want to do things because you've seen those stories. It could be Zuckerberg's movie, or it could be the Steve Jobs movie, or any story that if you've seen those stories and that irrational belief is driving you, that is the function of exposure. I think skills is very adaptable. You can keep learning. What is not adaptable is whether you have that irrational, just almost borderline overconfidence, borderline irrational self-belief. Just want to do this and I will do this.
Also finding the right person, no? Maybe.
Finding the right person is also very important. I'm yet to see someone who is extremely driven and has conviction about something who doesn't get it eventually. Who's find some way to get it. The world is very moldable if you have strong self-belief. And that I think self-belief is the only trait that young founders should have in abundance, because it will be shattered every 6 months. There's this thing that a lot of people say where the death of an early stage company is not when the product doesn't work or when they run out of money. It's when the founder's grit runs out and they're not able to get up and again give it another shot. So that's kind of the only thing that I think helped. That was in abundance, extreme self-belief. Also that I've seen in a lot of other founders that I admire, whether it's Sam, Zuck, everybody, they have almost irrational levels of self-belief even when they don't have anything to show for it, because it's product and companies are a materialization of self-belief of a founder 5 years down the line.
Tell me about Sam. Was it the first investor on board?
He was not the first investor, but one of the it happened at the same time actually with a lot of other people.
Tell me about that raising money and everything. How did you learn to pitch?
I didn't actually learn to pitch. So the thing, how the way we started the company was we got the grant. The same fund was we'll give you some more money to go after this. And then we'll go out and talk to some more investors, see what we should do. And we got a few investors. Most of them were from the Bay Area. And we have one investor in India, which is P15. But most of them were there. So we were talking to those investors. I had met Sam a few times. I've said this before also, but I've met him. A very interesting story of how I met him. cold DM'd him several times. He didn't respond originally. Then eventually he responded. And when I went to SF for the first time, I was like, I really want to meet you. He ignored the first message. Then he was like, I'm traveling. I cannot meet you now, but I would love to later. First emails, then I texted him. I was like, I'm in SF. Can we meet? He said no.
This is before Induced AI.
This before everything. Yeah, before there was a company. And then he came back. I heard he came back. So when he was traveling, I was still there. And then I took a house 2 blocks away from his, the original OpenAI office. And then I texted him 2 blocks away from your office. So if you ever have 15 minutes of Uber time or anywhere that you're going, any time that you have, like just tell me, I'll come. And then he texted me once that, like the same afternoon, that like you can come at this time, like let's meet. Like I think what I spoke to him first about was also, I think there's a big shift that's happening in AI and you are doing it and like a bunch of other people are doing it. There's a lot of important changes happening in the world. What are, like you're talking about stuff that he thinks is going to be like important at an application level for AI to be democratized for use. We spoke about how you can build software on your own using these models. And we spoke about a little bit about the bots and like how, because they've written some of the first papers that were written about agents. So very well plugged into the space. And then I don't remember how it ended, but we spoke a little bit about hacker houses and how, where you should live, how you should talk to people, like a lot of random things. And then it just happened. So that stopped. And then I kept in touch.
Came back to India.
I came back to India. And then when we were doing the round, it was just a shot in the dark originally where I was like I want him on board. And the first time I met him, I was like, are you still investing? He was like, I'm not investing too much because I'm too focused on OpenAI, Helion, everything else. He's made very few investments after that. Like he used to be a very, very active investor in his YC days. It was also a very short call to decide. Like that was a Zoom, but a very short call to decide and do things. He was like, what are you building? And how do you want to do it? And when are you moving to SF?
You pitched Induced AI to him.
I didn't pitch Induced to him. I didn't pitch actually too much. I was like, we have some ideas around automation that we want to build. I think there'll be a lot of different changes that happen that will allow new forms of automation platforms to be built. And we'll figure out what to build with that. So it was not, like he didn't actually see any product. He didn't see anything.
Yeah, that's what
It was mostly just like broadly what do you want to do? And yeah, pretty much. That was it.
So he gave you money so that you stopped chasing him.
Probably. Yeah, probably. And he was...
things went simpler from there to raise the other...
So that was actually more towards the end, I think. So we didn't raise any money after that. After we got him, we were like, no more round money. It's done. Like this is what... That's sort of parallel, but that was the last chunk that we got. Even at that point, I think he was very... like he's just like this with all of his founders, I think. He's tries to be helpful. He's like, I can help you with different things. And I was like, I don't need, you don't need to sell yourself. So ChatGPT had not publicly launched yet. It actually happened 3 days later. So just 3 days before. But this was pre-ChatGPT. So it all, I actually realized that if I were to have the conversation later, I probably couldn't have gotten hold of him because right after ChatGPT launched, there was a big blow up all over the internet. OpenAI suddenly became a big thing. They were all over the news, everything. So he got pulled into a lot of different places.
Can we say Twitter has played a very big role in your journey?
I think so. Most of my initial network, most of the people that I met, how I met Ayush, has all been through Twitter. Even how I got exposed to people like Sam and Dylan and
Also publishing your first project and everything was there, right?
Proof of work, getting to know people, getting into Spry, working with them, all Twitter. It was all Twitter.
Does the media attention bother you?
Doesn't bother me. It doesn't. I don't even think I have enough to be bothered by it at this point. It's.
Right. An article Indian origin boy and.
वो तो गलत भी लिख दिया ना बहुत Indian origin लिख दिया but it doesn't make any. It has not made any difference so far. It has helped the brand and product where we get customers easily and there's some trust built up. But personally, it doesn't actually I don't realize a difference at all. Because I think the first 1,000 followers on Twitter was a big unlock, because that I was like, now I have 1,000 followers, and that was a big jump. But after that, I also think I don't value it too much, where like like if I show the product to someone who's a very respectable leader or someone who I really want to work with, and they appreciate the product, that is like, then I won't sleep that night. That is like more exciting than getting an article somewhere. It's also sort of like liquidating a brand, where you don't want to do it too early. You keep building substance and value, and like the best brands are built when they're liquidated at the end of value creation. So getting too out there very early is almost always bad.
Yeah, but you did not have control over it, did you?
I did not have too much control over it, which is why I try to not do too much of it also. Or like,
No, but buys you legitimacy and
it buys you some legitimacy. It definitely makes visas easier.
when are you flying to SF?
We'll have a team in Bangalore, but we'll have maybe me, and I usually keep going back. One more person there, because most of our customers are in the US. We sell primarily there. That most of our investors are there. Most of AI happens in SF. If you have the opportunity, why would you not like take the highest fidelity like environment to accomplish what you want to do?
I was actually trying to understand your tweets, but now I do. Because before I had this conversation with you, we've spoken very briefly for 10-15 minutes, I think, in Jar office. So when I was looking at your tweets, I'm like, कितनी depth कहाँ से आ रही है? But अभी मैं समझ रहा हूँ कितनी depth कहाँ से आ रही है.
I used to.
तो ये कहाँ से आ रही थी? Because you were not a founder back then also, right?
I was not a founder back then.
Yeah.
It was very like, it's a little weird to say, but it was like, these are just observations about, like very obvious observations about the world that I was just like, let's flag it. Let's see.
When you say don't have a plan B in 2021, what are you even talking about? I mean, I now I have the timelines in my head.
Oh, I don't know what I had in mind.
Okay, so 2022, you're saying founders should be chiefly pessimistic in the short term and overly optimistic in the long term. The former builds up to the latter fuels you for the former. So by that time, you'd raise money.
This is 2022.
December.
Just about the time. This, I think, was just coming from the fact that I like be operating the same thing, like self-belief and long-term conviction is what drives, like, is fuel for the journey, for you, for your team, for everybody else. But day to day, it's very important to be a very sharp, like, executive or person who's like, no BS, this is how it needs to be done, this is bad, this is good. You cannot fall below a certain level, like you have to maintain discipline, you have to maintain a high bar for like everything. And then even if things don't work, like it's usually easiest to be pessimistic about like the timelines and things like we want to ship it by Friday, it should happen by Thursday, because it's definitely not happening by Thursday. Like have a backbone in daily operations, and that might usually mean being a little pessimistic about like things, but it all builds up to an optimistic vision.
Consciously try and be grounded, or you're like this?
I am very, I think my bar for when you can afford to not be grounded is too high. Like,
तो अभी कुछ किया नहीं है.
हाँ, मतलब बहुत high है बार तो. Like, I understand very intuitively why people like Elon are still grounded. It's just that their bar is even higher. Where, like, if you get to Mars, you can celebrate for a week, probably. But then, I think there is this, like, once you just get obsessed with doing things and, like, building things, that is the only, like, you're just addicted to that process. You cannot get distracted from it. I also think, so it might not just be product. It might just be upward acceleration yourself, where, like, personally, if I take myself out of the company, the reason why I want to do all of this is because it exposes me to new ideas and new, like, things that I would not have exposure to. It puts me in rooms where I would otherwise not be. It helps me get conversations with people who I otherwise would not have spoken to. And there is, like, most of that is yet to be done. And that is, like, it's a never-ending loop. Like, you will always find a more interesting room to be in. You will always have the next most interesting thing to build. but it's like a chase to be at the edge where if there is progress happening in the world, I want to be in the rooms that help make those progress decisions happen. So it's just like I can't understand, or like I've never thought about it also that way, but it's like I'm really obsessed and addicted with that upward acceleration.
And who do you look up to? What's your North Star in terms of a person?
I don't have a North Star in terms of a person directly. I think there's a North Star in terms of like culture and what sort of culture do you, it's mimetics. So what tribe do you associate yourself with? It's also sort of how religion works, but like mimetically, if I associate myself with people who like doing hard things, pushing the boundaries of like science, engineering, technology, progress, and like just like passionate about debating, discussing future of where we go as a species, solving the hardest problems that like actually give you nightmares if you understand them enough. That is the sort of culture that I would like to be a part of. That's the culture that I've always tried to, like, that's the culture I've tried to ape into. Like, it's very, like, mimetic desires are very strong where, like, if you look at certain things and you try to be like them, Chamath says this in one of his Stanford talks, where he's like, if you're super, super smart, or you just copy from the smart people and keep repeating it until, like, you become one of them. That's the culture that I've tried to ape into. So I think that is, I don't know, not strength of a person, but it's that group of people who, like, a lot of them are tech founders just because it happens so that building a company is one of the best ways to become a part of that clan or like become one of them. But you can also do that in politics. You can also do that in other different ways.
Capital flows where the talent goes. This is 2021.
This was very obvious. It was more like just realization that India is getting too much money and it's like Indian...
Did your Twitter following just shoot up after all of this happened? Or no?
Little bit. Like 2,000 or 3,000.
And you're not tweeting anymore. You don't want to build in public, or do you?
I think building in public a little bit is good. So we post some stuff occasionally. We're not doing a good job at it. So that's something we want to fix. We want to build more publicly. But there was a time where I was building too much in public. So I went to the other extreme where it was like, we'll not say something for a month and then we, like, the next day we'll come and do a big announcement. We are now doing more building in public, but for a brief period after the announcement and everything, we were not tweeting and putting too much out because we had just too much like real work to do. With like customers and people on the list saying, when will you give access? How do you solve this problem? This is breaking, fix this, fix that. So then it was like we already had enough feedback. Twitter is mostly a feedback loop for ideas, and right now it's mostly company ideas, but every once in a while I'll go and tweet something if I observe something. And like, I don't know what did I... Something recent that I've put out is probably more... Like, this is one thing that I put out. Like, as a young founder, what you lack in experience, you can make up for in rate of learning. Which is... This was what I was feeling at that time. Like a lot of young people, when they start out, it's like you don't have experience, you can't do things. But what people say is that you have the fresh take on something is not really a fresh take. It's basically getting to an answer faster than the traditional way of building up to that answer. And like in most cases, for young people who are doing stuff, rate of acceleration is way more important than direction, or because you will keep changing things. There's a lot of chaos that will happen. You just have to move fast. And if you keep making mistakes, if you keep moving fast, you will like eventually get to the point where you want to get. But rate of learning has to be very, like, you can't have strong beliefs, loosely held is the best like situation to be in.
Has anyone told you you're too young to do this? या फिर SF में ऐसी बातें ही नहीं होती?
I think उन circles में तो नहीं होती. Where like
कोई rejection story बता यार.
नहीं, rejections तो बहुत होते हैं. कि like people will dismiss you. They'll be like, this is not the right way to do something. Like what you built is great, but how will you scale it? Like, but then it's like maybe I can't do it, but I will still not stop. So what's the point? Like, it just doesn't make sense because I will still try to do it. either I will find a way to do it, or I will retry and find a way to do it. There is no there's no logical way to not do it, basically. So there's no option. That's also sort of what I mean when don't have a plan B, which is like if you're just too obsessed with it, you cannot, like the famous Zuckerberg thing that was in the movie or in his story where Yahoo was trying to buy them and he was like, what if we sell this, I make $1 billion. What will I do with it? I'll probably start another social networking site.
Yeah.
I already like the one I have, so why would I sell? That's sort of what it is, where like at this given moment, I don't see myself doing anything more interesting than the kind of work that I'm doing right now. And that is the only benchmark for me, where like the nuances will keep changing. How to do it, who do you do it with, when will you do it, like will it work or not? But there is like nothing more interesting for me to do. And which is why I will eventually come back to this. So there's no, like, you take negative feedback, you use it to improve the situation that you're in. But like, there's no discouraging that ever happens. At least in our, अभी तक तो नहीं. कोई इतना brutal feedback दे देगा eventually, then that's a different situation.
Are you scared of anything right now?
Just slow rate of learning. Like, it is very hard. Like, the most scary situation for me is when you become, like, I don't like saying this, but there is abhi to Twitter pe there's a big thing that has now come out, right, with the effective accelerationism meme that is like spreading, where you are like, where E/ACC is a different group of people than people who are like, it all started with the AI safeties thing, where a lot of people are, let's build AI, let's open source it, let's make it available. And then a group of people are like, this will kill the world, let's protect it. Like 5 people should control it. Like we should not be too out there with it. Eliezer Yudowsky and everybody else. I think that is like the most scary situation. Like I don't want to be in a decelerating or a constrained environment. Like be extremely optimistic, have a lot of self-belief, and then be wrong. Like it's fine, but it's better than being scared and not trying new things and not like shooting very, very high and biting more than you can chew and then figuring out how to digest it later. It's much better to just like take big leaps and then be wrong about it and like figure out, because you'd still make something of it. That is the only thing that's scary, like very metaphorically. But besides that, it's all good.
Okay, and this is one question that I've asked to so many people now, but interesting to ask you, although now I kind of get the gist of your answer. Maybe what's the value of money in your life?
I can also copy a line that again Chamath has said, but economic forces are very powerful just because they can control, they can predict behavior of like humans. Like you sufficiently motivate someone and they will do something in a certain way. If you don't sufficiently motivate them, they will not do something in a certain way. So access to capital, and I think money, like liquid money is like, in literal terms, money is like, it's very hard. You should not understand it. It doesn't mean anything. But like access to capital and capital as a force is an instrument of just change. Like it's a way of expressing your opinion. And if you have enough control and access over it, your opinion will be heard. When people get a statue built, or when Trump gets a Trump Tower built, it's expressing an opinion. It's expressing his worldview that a Trump Tower should exist. It says something. When like Geo is getting built, or when OpenAI is getting built, Vinod Khosla is voting with his money that AI should be open and exist in the world with the 300 million that he put in there. So it's a way of high fidelity, like way of expressing your opinions, such that you can like you're materializing them in the world to express it. But it's all like, this is very, again, I talk very meta like this. Some people realize this is all bullshit. But with like the Mac, Apple is saying something. It's expression of an idea. Office spaces, like devices, it's all expression of an idea. So broadly, it's just capital is a way of controlling and expressing your worldview. And if you do it well, people will like hear it. And the reason I want to get access to capital, and I want to keep getting access to more and more capital, is because I have a belief that my worldview has its own pros and cons, but it is my worldview, and it is like I want to see it materialized in the world because I think it will lead to certain changes, good and bad both, but it will lead to certain changes that I want to see happen.
Do you read a lot?
I used to read a lot. Now it is reduced. The regular books have reduced. But I still try to read. I read a lot of interesting, unrelated things also. I study game theory. I was reading a Navy SEAL book recently because I find after a point, instead of studying your own like field or studying business tech, it's like you'll probably find more interesting ideas in unrelated fields. So now it's a lot of eccentric reading. I was studying how a nuclear engine is built. Podcasting is good now. I try to listen to a lot of them now, and every time I listen to one, I'll put something out. Like there was a good podcast that I listened to with Harry Stebbings and like Miles Grimshaw about how the idea of AI is to sell the output, not the process. Most software tools are selling the process right now. HubSpot is saying to make a lead, you have to do this, then do this, then do this. With AI, it's like I want to close a lead, and then everything that needs to be done is done. Like you're getting the output. So podcasting has replaced a lot of reading for me now, and a lot of conversations have replaced it. So instead of in like siloed reading, I still think it's great, but talking to interesting people and just feeding off of that has replaced a lot of 2020, 21 reading. Because now I can talk to people. So earlier I was like, who will talk to me without any interesting thoughts? But yeah, mix of everything right now.
One of the perks of podcasting for me is to talk to people like you. And I think we will talk again once you're back from SS.
Okay.
Maza aaya, bro. Thanks for your time. And best of luck for your US trip and whatever you're building, man.
Yeah, hopefully I get the visa on time.